"Sir, this row is restricted to immediate family. Please step aside or we'll have to call security." That's what they told him. Calm, mechanical, dismissive. He didn't reply, didn't explain. Just stood there quietly, his hands at his sides, clutching a single sheet of folded paper. It was handwritten in block letters, the ink slightly smeared from wear. "Dad, front row. You're the reason I made it." To them, he looked like a stranger in the wrong place. But a few seats back, 6 men sat in pressed uniforms, watching silently. They didn't ask who he was, they already knew. And when they stood, the air changed. The morning light was still soft when Linda Monroe eased into the staff parking area behind St. Albans College. Nestled in a quiet stretch of rural Virginia, the campus was still, almost reverent. Graduation day always carried that quiet tension, part celebration, part ending. She stepped out in low heels, her fingers tightening around a printed program folded neatly in her hand. Midway down page 2 was a name she knew by heart. And under it, 2 words. Dean's List. She'd stared at that line so often lately it felt etched into her bones. Inside the auditorium, the air buzzed with low voices, rustling gowns, and the faint scent of fresh-cut flowers. Parents took their seats, siblings snapped pictures, ushers moved in polite bursts. Linda followed the usher's gesture, row 5, center left. She liked that spot. Close enough to see faces, far enough to watch the whole crowd. That's how she noticed him. He didn't enter with the others. No smile, no chatter, no family trailing behind. He came in through a side door near the emergency exit. Quiet, deliberate, alone. His jacket was a formal military cut, worn down at the cuffs, shoulders a bit too broad. Faded denim covered his legs, and his boots looked like they'd seen more than polished floors. His posture was still, not stiff, just grounded, like a man trained to wait without needing to speak. Linda leaned slightly to the side. There was something in his stillness that caught her, something practiced. He moved toward the front slowly, scanning the first few rows marked with silver signs. Reserved. Family only. He paused beside one of the aisle seats, the kind left open for someone important. Then a young woman with a headset stepped into his path, holding a clipboard like a shield. "Sir, these seats are for approved guests. I'm going to have to ask you to step back." He nodded once, voice steady. "My son's graduating today. He wanted me here." She didn't ask for a name. Didn't look at the list. She simply pointed to the back of the hall. "If you stay here, we'll have to remove you." He said nothing. Took one step back. 2 security guards in navy suits drifted closer, keeping their distance, but ready. No one else seemed to notice. The crowd was caught up in the usual distractions. Ties being straightened, hair being fluffed, phones lifted for selfies. But Linda noticed, and so did the 6 men in row 5. Their eyes had followed him the moment he entered. None of them moved, but none of them looked away. The man with the marine jacket stepped into the shadows by the side wall. He clasped his hands behind his back and fixed his gaze forward, unmoved. And just as the house lights dimmed, a voice echoed from overhead. "Welcome, faculty, families, and distinguished guests." But the most powerful moment of the day had already begun. Applause filled the air like static. Phones snapped photos. Someone near the podium made a quip about student debt, and the audience responded with easy laughter. Linda didn't. She wasn't listening to the jokes. Her eyes stayed on the man by the side wall. The same young woman in the headset passed him again. This time, she had company. A man in a navy blazer with a clipboard tucked under his arm. "He's still there," she muttered. "I don't think he's on the list." "I'll have someone keep tabs," the man replied without even glancing. Linda felt her throat tighten. Not from anger, not fear, but something heavier. That man didn't look like a problem. He looked like someone who'd already carried too many. The student speaker stepped up next. He was clean-cut, smooth in speech, sharp in style. Linda found his name on the program, the dean's son. He thanked the staff, honored his peers, dropped the names everyone expected. Then he smiled wider. "And a special nod," he said with a wink, "to the families in the front row, setting the standard for what success really looks like." Polite laughter swept the room. Soft, knowing, exclusionary. Linda didn't laugh. Neither did the man in uniform, and neither did the three men seated behind her. The tallest of the trio leaned forward slightly, square jaw, cap pulled low. He spoke just loud enough for his friends to hear. "That jab wasn't random," he said. They gave tight, silent nods. Linda looked toward the back again, still there, still unmoved, still holding whatever weight had followed him through those doors. And that's when she understood. He didn't come to start anything. He came because someone asked him to be there. Someone who believed he should be seen. Whoever had turned him away had made a mistake. And not a small one. She didn't know his story. Didn't know what branch he'd served, what sacrifices he'd made, or whose safety he'd once stood guard over. But she knew this much. He didn't belong at the edge of the room, shadowed like an afterthought. And if no one else was willing to see it, maybe she had to. The program kept rolling. One name after another echoed across the speakers. Families leaned in for photos. Applause rose and fell in rhythm. But Linda couldn't look away from the man in the corner, nor could the three behind her. They sat straighter than everyone else, still and alert, like they were waiting for something they'd already seen coming. Then the usher returned, this time with someone in uniform, clipboard in one hand, walkie-talkie on his hip. Linda leaned forward slightly. Her eyes narrowed. The man didn't argue as the guard approached. He turned, listened, quiet as ever. She couldn't hear the words, but she saw the reply. He spoke firmly, never raising his voice. "I was invited," he said. "My son asked me to be here. I'm not leaving until he gets his moment." The guard adjusted his stance, trying to claim control. "Sir, you'll need to follow me." No one else seemed to notice. The room was too focused on its own joy, except Linda and the men behind her. She turned to the woman beside her, a faculty badge clipped to her blazer. "Do you know who that man is?" The woman barely looked up. "Probably just wandered in. Happens every year." Linda's jaw tensed. Wandered in. As if some people were meant to be invisible. She'd expected him to fade into the background, just another face that didn't belong. But now, as she really looked, he wasn't invisible. He was unmissable. His face held decades. The jaw locked tight like a man who'd clenched it through war and silence. One shoulder dipped slightly, like it still remembered pain no one asked about. The coat, dark, brass-buttoned, its sleeves worn raw, wasn't for show. It was his best. Not new. Not borrowed. Earned. He hadn't come looking for trouble. He'd come ready for one thing only, to see his son take the stage. Another guard approached, more firm this time. A hand found the Marine's elbow, gentle but guiding. That's when Linda heard it, the soft rustle of paper. He reached into his coat pocket and unfolded a note, careful like it was sacred. The edges were worn smooth from too many readings. He held it out, not to defend himself, but to explain. "My son sent this," he said, voice low, almost reverent. The ink had faded slightly. Linda caught a glimpse of what was written. "Dad, I want you in the front row." But the usher barely glanced at it. Her voice stayed mechanical. "No guest pass, no seat. Please step aside." He drew in a breath, nodded once, then stepped back. No defiance, just silent obedience. Linda felt it like a hand around her throat. Fury, yes, but also something quieter. Guilt. Not hers. His. Carried like a second skin. She opened her mouth, ready to speak, ready to say something, anything. But she didn't have to. A chair scraped behind her. Then another. Then 4 more. In row 5, 6 men rose together. No commands. No commotion. Just a single ripple of motion that cut through the ceremony like a blade. The first man, tall, broad, cap pulled low over his eyes, moved down the aisle. His face was calm, but there was steel in his step. He didn't hesitate. He walked straight to the old Marine. From inside his jacket he pulled something small, a glint of metal. He held it out. Linda leaned forward, trying to see. It wasn't police, not standard military. It shimmered under the lights, gold with silver wings. Then she saw it. The trident. United States Navy SEAL. Another man stepped up beside him, then another. All 6 now stood behind the Marine, not guarding, not protesting, backing him. The first one, the tall one, turned to the security guard. His voice was even, but it cut through the room. "He's not leaving," he said. "That man led us when nobody else would. He stays." A hush spread through the rows. Whispers began. Heads turned. Linda rose slowly, eyes on the Marine. Still unnamed. Still quiet. But no longer alone. Because nobody earns a SEAL's loyalty without bleeding for it. And nobody stands with 6 unless they've walked through fire. The guards froze. Their eyes moved from the trident, to the men, to the now watching crowd. The usher backed up a step, her hand trembling slightly. And the old Marine? He didn't lift his head in pride. He didn't look victorious. He stared at the floor. Because this wasn't about proving anything. It was about one thing. A seat. Just one. To watch his son walk across the stage. The woman beside Linda didn't ask questions this time. She didn't whisper or guess. She just said it plainly. That man's name will matter before this day is done. Then she stepped aside. Quietly. Deliberately. As if making room for a truth that had taken too long to be seen. Whatever this had started as, a ceremony, a script, it wasn't that anymore. The auditorium had shifted. Something real had taken over. And it had come from the back. From a man no one offered a seat, but who carried more honor than half the people with titles ever would. For a long moment, the room said nothing. No claps, no camera clicks. Just the soft hum of the ceiling lights and the restless shuffling of papers being tucked away beneath folded arms. The 6 men still stood, shoulder to shoulder, silent but unmistakable. Their clothes were civilian, but their presence wasn't. And the tridents in their palms caught every beam of light like they were forged from fire itself. Linda didn't move. Her heart pounded in her chest, but her hands stayed locked in place. Around her, whispers faded. Conversations died in midair. Even the sound of breathing seemed to stall. And at the center of it all, the man in the worn Marine coat, still quiet, still. He held the invitation in one hand, folded tight. His jaw wasn't clenched in rage. It was held back by years of knowing when to speak and when to let silence speak louder. The tallest of the 6 stepped forward again. His voice wasn't raised, but it filled the room. "He's not going anywhere," he said. "You won't remove him." He turned toward the crowd, his voice anchoring every drifting thought in the room. "This man led us when everything collapsed. When there was fire behind us and chaos ahead, he went first." He looked back at the guards. "He stays. End of discussion." No applause, no cheers. Just a shift, like something heavy had been lifted, only to reveal something heavier underneath. Then a new voice. From the left side of the room. It wasn't loud, but it cut deep. A man had risen, his chest lined with medals, his jacket dusted with age and purpose. Heads turned. Linda's breath caught. She knew that uniform. A colonel. "I know that man," he said, steady as stone. "His name is Master Sergeant Raymond Cole, 3rd Recon, United States Marine Corps, retired." He took a breath. You could hear the memory in it. In 2006, Kandahar, Operation Firewatch, I saw him run straight into a burning compound while bullets tore through the air. 5 Marines were trapped. He didn't wait. He didn't ask. He just went. The room froze. "He came back alone," the colonel continued, "because he carried the rest out on his back." Silence held. A single cough echoed like a gunshot. A dropped program landed softly, but it felt like thunder. Linda looked again at the man, Raymond Cole. Still unmoved, still quiet. Not asking for recognition. Not even looking up. Then came movement. From the stage. A young man in cap and gown stepped out from behind the seated graduates, hands trembling, eyes locked on the crowd. He didn't wait for permission. He just walked to the podium, took the mic, and said, "That's my dad." Every head turned. The room braced itself, because now nothing was hidden, and everyone was watching. Lucas stood still behind the podium, his fingers gripping the edge as if grounding himself. Then he looked up and exhaled. "Stand tall. Keep going. Be the kind of man you'd be proud to meet in the mirror." His voice didn't shake, but his eyes said everything. He turned his head toward the rear of the hall. "I'm not proud because of this gown or that diploma," he said, stepping forward. "I'm proud because of him." Gasps were absent. No one even blinked. The silence was deep enough to feel. Lucas walked down the steps, past rows of graduates frozen in place, and headed straight for the man by the exit, the one they'd nearly turned away. No hesitation. He reached him. Then, with slow certainty, Lucas raised his hand in salute. Raymond didn't return it. He stepped forward and wrapped both arms around his son. The embrace was quiet, unscripted. And maybe that's why it landed so hard, because it wasn't for anyone else. It was theirs. Behind them, 6 men who had stood in silence all this time now straightened in perfect unison. Their right hands rose slowly, saluting the man who once walked ahead so they could make it home. Linda Monroe blinked rapidly, not out of sentiment, out of something else. Humility. Because this moment had reshaped the room, and not one person in it had earned the right to look away. Raymond placed a hand on Lucas's shoulder and leaned in. Whatever he whispered was meant only for his son. Lucas nodded. Then, without another word, the two of them turned to face the front. The usher who had blocked Raymond earlier stared down at her clipboard like it had betrayed her. A security guard slipped into a side hallway, disappearing. Nobody tried to stop them now. No one told them where they could or couldn't go. Lucas led his father forward, hand in hand. This time, people didn't resist. They made way. Not because someone ordered it, because it was right. Raymond didn't speak, didn't gloat. He walked with the same grounded calm that had unnerved them earlier. Now it commanded respect. Every step was steady. Every footfall silent, but heavy with meaning. And then came the sound. Just one pair of hands clapping, measured, software, then another, like drops of rain slowly becoming a storm. The auditorium rose, not to cheer, not to celebrate, but to acknowledge. It wasn't loud, it was honest. Linda stood too. Her hands met not in admiration, but in apology, because the man they almost erased had become the one they could no longer ignore. Raymond reached the roped-off section, the very spot where he'd been denied. No one blocked him, no one spoke. The usher stepped aside, eyes lowered, and the Marine sat down in silence. Second row. Center left. Lucas beside him. Behind them, the 6 SEALs remained on their feet, because some men never stopped standing for those who once led the way. The 6 SEALs didn't return to their seats. They remained at attention behind Raymond, anchored like a wall, not beside him, not before him, but exactly where they'd always stood, at his back. The ceremony continued, but it wasn't the same. When the dean returned to the stage, he paused mid-step. His eyes fell on Raymond. His voice, when it came, was smaller than before. "Today we are joined by guests of uncommon honor, ones we failed to recognize when we should have." There was a pause, then a single clap, then more. But the applause wasn't for speeches. It wasn't for titles or programs. It was for a man who entered unnoticed, carrying nothing but a worn card and the kind of strength the world too often forgets how to see. Raymond didn't smile. He didn't bow his head in acknowledgement. He simply unfolded the note again, silently reading the same line he'd carried all morning. "Dad, I want you in the front row." Then he folded it once more and tucked it away, close to his chest. Because that's what he came for. Not a spotlight, just that seat. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed, Linda stayed seated. She wanted to see what remained when the noise fell away, and what she saw would stay with her forever. One by one, graduates passed by Raymond. Some stopped and shook his hand. Some placed a palm gently on his shoulder before moving on. None of them needed words. One young woman, her face streaked with emotion, paused in front of him. She gave a sharp, silent salute and whispered, "Thank you for carrying them." Raymond nodded. Quietly. As always. Then one of the seals, the youngest, stepped forward. He placed something small in Raymond's hand. A coin. Linda recognized it instantly. A challenge coin, given only when words weren't enough. Raymond turned it over in his palm. One side bore their team's insignia. The other held 5 engraved words. The quiet ones lead the loudest wars. He closed his hand around it. He didn't cry. But Linda could have sworn, just for a second. His shoulders lightened, like something heavy had shifted. Not taken. Just shared. And that was everything. Later, as the space emptied and the janitors moved quietly through the aisles, Linda finally rose. She turned once more toward the man who had changed the rhythm of the morning without raising his voice. He hadn't come for praise. He hadn't come to prove anything. He came because his son asked him to. And one boy remembering when the world so often forgets was enough to change the room. At the door, Linda paused. Her hand resting on the handle, she looked back. At the 6 still standing. At the son who stepped aside for his father. At the man who stood in silence until the whole room stood for him. She didn't say it aloud, but in her heart, the words were clear. He came for a seat, and left with a room. Not because he demanded it, but because they owed it.